Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, featuring my dad, the best coder ever.
So besides being a code monkey software engineer, talking head on LinkedIn, I'm also a father of 3 children, one of whom just graduated high school recently, and I have 2 other smaller children. And this was Father's Day week as well. So I've been thinking a lot about, being a parent, advice I'd give my kids, especially as one of them is graduating high school and getting out into the world and deciding what he wants to do with his life. And sometimes late at night, when I'm laying in my bed and can't sleep, I think about all the messed up stuff I did and how I could probably do it over again and how much further I'd be in life if I had just started earlier. Hindsight's always 20/20. Boo-hoo, poor me. I think we all have these thoughts at night. Like, man, I wish I had invested in, Tesla stock in, 2015 or something like that. These regrets that we have. And I think a lot about my career trajectory, especially within software, me getting in at the age of 30, and then how far I've gone in the last 10 years. And I'm thinking, man, if I had started earlier, I wonder where I could be now. Because I've seen a lot of people that are much younger than me getting into director level positions, VP positions, and they're a few years ahead of me. And, the grass is always greener. We're always comparing ourselves, or at least I am. It's a terrible habit. But then I think about my son specifically and what he wants to do. And then I think about the advice I'd tell you. And I thought, well, what's the advice I would tell my son if he wanted to get into software engineering and said, hey, Dad, I want to learn how to code. I want to do what you're doing. I'd be really excited. By the way, most of my kids, 2 out of 3 at least, don't really care about coding. They don't want to do that. I understand. If they did, I would love it. I think it's a great profession. I enjoy it tremendously, and that's why I still do it despite owning a boot camp. And, I think there's a lot of people that get in this profession, then they get into content creation or some other business, and they leave it, and that's fine. I really love it. So I like doing this stuff and don't really see me leaving anytime soon. So I think, what would I tell my son if he wanted to be a software engineer in 2024? Done a few episodes on this kind of topic, but this will be a little bit different because I'm going to get down to like what I would tell him straight up. So I'd say, first of all, go to college. If you're 18 years old and you're wondering what you should do, just go to college and learn computer science. If you have the money and the time, do it. If you have a nice scholarship, do it. You're young. It's kind of hard to get taken seriously as an 18-year-old, anything really. I mean, whether you're in sales or computer programming or whatever. So I'd say just do that. Now, if you say, college is not for me, I don't have the money, the time, I don't have the resources. It's just not my thing. I'm not going to do that. I'm like, okay, well, that's fair too. Then go to a boot camp. Or find somebody that knows how to code and is willing to teach you and ask them exactly what they should do and then pay them money so they can keep you accountable. I don't believe in getting anything for free because free stuff doesn't work. There's too much free information out there. And if it worked, then everybody would be achieving their dreams. Everybody would have a 6-pack, they'd be rich, and they'd be software engineers or in sales or driving trucks or whatever. I mean, even barbers got to go to school and pay, $10,000-$12,000 to learn how to cut hair. So if you want to get into this high-paying profession, I'd say find somebody. Now, luckily you have me, your father, and I can teach you how to do this stuff. First thing I'm going to tell you to do before you even come to me, before you even talk to me, I want you to go on Codecademy. And I want you to go through the HTML and CSS tracks on there. And I want you to tell me if you can see yourself doing this for 8 hours a day. If the answer is a strong no, then you need to find something else because that is ultimately what this job entails. Even your dream job is ultimately a job. There's parts of this job I like, and there's parts of it I don't like. It's stressful, which is also one of the reasons why the pay is so high. And it's mission critical stuff you're building. Again, why the pay is so high. You're building the kind of software that runs major corporations, small businesses, generates money for the most part. So, when something breaks at 4 a.m., it's going to be fixed. And you're going to be the one that fixes it. So if you hate this job, it is not like your typical 9 to 5, close your laptop, go home. That's not the case for most places, especially when you're starting off. So comes back and he says, hey, Dad, you know what? I think I like this stuff. I like HTML and CSS. Cool. Let's build a simple web page, son. So we're going to build a very simple web page that's going to have some buttons, some text, some CSS styling and stuff like that to make it look just kind of decent, right? And at that point, say, okay, cool. I want you to learn things like maybe Bootstrap, maybe Tailwind, just make it look pretty. Kind of go off on your own and figure it out, right? And we'd go through this process until we get through JavaScript and React or whatever. And I'd say, now, son, here's the important part. All this front end stuff we've learned, all the stuff that's on the client side, the stuff that makes it look pretty, even including the JavaScript, that's great. That might even get you hired. But I want you to be safe because you're my kid, right? And I want you to have the best chance at getting a really, really great career here. And if we want to get you to be, rich, I want you to be director of engineering or VP of engineering. We have to learn back-end stuff. And if you look at the statistics for the number of open positions for front-end developers versus full stack versus back-end, front-end is a very tiny fraction of the open positions, which is also why I think that a lot of bootcamp grads that only went to front-end focused places are having a lot of trouble. And I wouldn't even tell my kid about the languages they should learn. I'm like, well, we're going to start with JavaScript. Obviously, we're not going to learn Python or Ruby or Scala or Go or whatever, even though these are all in-demand languages. We're going to start with JavaScript because it's easy, it's accessible, and it gets your foot in the door. My whole goal is not to be like, let's learn everything up front. I don't want to front load you at all. I want you to go to, boot camp or work with me, learn the basics so we can get you hired, because that's where the real education starts. Your goal is to get through that type of that base level knowledge as fast as possible so we can get you into the big leagues, which is where the real fun starts. I think people think the boot camp's the hard part, and it is. It's really difficult. But the real hard part is after the boot camp. And there's two parts to this. There's skills acquisition and there's getting a job. Really, really different areas to focus on. Same reason why at a place like Parsity or any good program, you're going to have a pretty robust career services curriculum and a person that knows what they're doing, because I can teach people all about the skills acquisition part. We have that down, I feel like. The harder part, in my opinion, honestly, is getting the job. Now, the skill acquisition part is no joke. We need to get you to full stack, meaning you need to be able to deploy a full stack project, a front end, a back end, has a database. Ideally, it uses SQL, MongoDB being a close second. We use MongoDB at Parsity. If I was talking to my son, I'd say, go through our program, but also I want you to learn SQL on the side. That's going to improve your chances of getting hired. Now, while he's doing this, I'd say, now, here's the other thing we got to focus on. How are you going to get hired? How are you going to show people at your young age, or not having any background, not having a computer science degree, how are we going to get you in the right place? And I'm thinking we want to get you in a startup. Why a startup? You're going to get a breadth of knowledge first, and then you can streamline and condense it down. Most places, in my opinion, and from my own experience, they want people that are a little bit of a generalist right now. That's because hiring is picking back up, but it's still not to the point where people are saying, I just want a front-end developer versus a back-end developer versus the mobile one versus the DevOps. People want an engineer that can kind of go in all sorts of different directions. And we could keep learning and learning and learning all these things. It would take forever. What's better is learning the basics, the bare minimum, which I'd say is full stack. The bare minimum is still like 6 months to a year of learning, and then getting a job in a startup. Say, okay, cool. Let's target startups. How are we going to target these startups? We're going to look for ones that are local to us, that are hiring, that require people to be in person. In person is going to repel most senior software engineers. They're going to say, I don't want to do that. Over a quarter of all companies are fully remote that are tech companies, and the senior engineers are the ones overwhelmingly taking up these remote jobs. So you want to slide in and you want to take the back door inside, go for the ones that are in person. And if you have to, people are going to hate when I say this. I would tell my son this. I have told my son this. Work for free. Find somebody build a website for them. Find somebody on Reddit. Go on there, go to the co-founder Reddit space, or find people that are not technical, that have technical ideas. Everybody has some idea for an app. And then build it for them as much as you can within reason. You don't want to spend 6 months doing it, but spend a couple weeks to a month maybe building this thing and saying, hey, I want to use this on my LinkedIn to show that I've done some work for you. Is that okay? If the person doesn't have an LLC or an S Corp, or they don't have a business that they can point to, then I wouldn't do it. If they have a business and you can look at it on LinkedIn, say, cool, yeah, I'll do it for free for sure. I just need you to give me a recommendation, and I want to be able to build something and talk about it, and then you can validate my experience. That is going to get you very, very far, because now people say, okay, you're a kid, you didn't go to college, but hey, you did some work. That's all people care about, really. They don't really care your degree. In fact, you're going to get judged the same as the person that went to a high school as the person that went to Harvard. You're both going to take the exact same coding challenge to get in at most places. I know some places people are going to say, oh, well, that's not the case where I live. People have to have a college degree, or they said you had to have a 4-year degree on there. That is all negotiable for the most part. I don't have a CS degree. I've gotten to engineering manager, associate director now. Even looking at VP titles in the near future, I'm sure it's not going to come up. I am 0% worried about that. And I tell my son the same thing. I'm like, it's not even a thing that comes in my mind. I really don't care. And if the place does have strict requirements, just go to a place that doesn't. They're all lowering these requirements. They're all getting rid of them. Becoming a software engineer is difficult. I don't mean to trivialize it. It is hard, but the degree requirement is becoming less of a thing. In some places, I know they make it a thing. Most places they don't. I'm not here to debate or argue that. Whatever. Learn the skills, be able to pass the interviews. Anyway, so you're building this thing on the side, you're getting some validation. Now you're on LinkedIn and you're doing kind of the same thing we're all doing on there. Easy apply, you're looking around. This is going to take 3 to 6 months, I'd say at least. Now you're going for those in-person positions when possible. You're using sites like Wellfound or Ada.com, or you're looking up for really niche things in the industry, and you're just trying to get the first possible thing you can get. This will take a while, but if you're consistent, I kind of just guarantee you're going to get it. It might take a while, and I might even suggest he hire somebody else. I'm like, you might want to hire an expert that can do this. For example, we have an expert at Parsity, and I'm like, okay, cool, you handle that part of it. We have another expert we're working with, David Roberts, who also handles that part of it. So that part can be taken care of for you if you're willing to pay for it. And I'm always willing to pay for somebody to get me somewhere faster, because I see that there's actually more money that I'm saving overall by getting there faster. If I'm thinking the first job is going to get me, in the Bay Area, let's say 80 to 100K, tops for a very junior position. So if you're 19 making 80 to 100K, that's worth you spending $1,000 or $2,000 on somebody to apply for you or do whatever you need to do to get to the interview and pass it. And I might even say also maybe pay for additional tutoring or mentorship for your interviews too. Same thing we do at Parsity. Say, hey, do some mock interviews, learn how to interview well so you can actually pass. Now you got the job. What do you do now? You got the job. You're in there. You're bumbling around. You barely know what's going on. You want to soak up as much information about the entire software development life cycle as possible. Meaning when you get there, you start doing the bare minimum work that they give you. Saying, hey, move a button around, change the color of this thing. That's all okay stuff. Teaches you a little bit about what it's like writing software on a team. You should know Git and GitHub at this point already. You're learning it for real now on the job. What you want to do is seek out those experiences which are going to accelerate your career. And I know these now from hindsight. It took me years to figure this out. The things that are going to accelerate your career are learning the deployment process, saying, how does the code get from my machine out to the web? You might just think that's just like a given thing, like somebody's going to sit you down and tell you the whole thing at a company. That's not going to happen in most cases. You need to seek out that stuff for yourself. But if you don't know what to seek out, you could be wasting years like I was doing that. So you're saying, hey, I want to see the deployment process. What is your on-call process like? What is the process like when a fire happens, something breaks on the web? What happens then? Can I shadow that person? You need to be looking through the peer reviews and pull requests of the more senior engineers saying, how do they write code and what am I missing? Then it's time to start reading some books. You have the practical knowledge that you got from a coding boot camp, or in this case, my son might have got it from me. I'm saying, son, you got to read a few books. If you really want to get ahead, read a few books because they're one, going to help you get an idea of the bigger picture of like computer architecture, but they're also going to help you have conversations with people that are smarter than you and sound like you know what you're talking about. So there's a couple books I think you should read. You don't know JavaScript, pretty good. This is going to help you out get a much more solid foundation, but we don't really care about languages. Languages change and, AI can increasingly write code. People don't talk in languages the higher you go up. No one cares really the language you know. That's for the people doing the work of writing the code. The higher you get up, at manager or staff levels, the language becomes an implementation detail. You care more about like, how does the whole system work? So reading Designing Data Intensive Applications, very, very popular book. I'm actually reading it right now. Excellent book to give you a much more high level overview of like, how does data like gets stored in work. Like at a really fundamental level, what we do is handle lots of data, whether you're on the front end or the back end. On the front end, you're handling the data and you're displaying it in a visual way. On the back end, you are quite literally handling the data and storing it and getting it for fast retrieval. If you mishandle it, it can be really slowly retrieved. How does that whole dance work? Think about Instagram or TikTok or whatever app you're using. It's just a bunch of data on the screen. There's millions of posts on Instagram. How do you get posts that are related to you? And how do you get posts that are just enough it doesn't crash your phone? And how does it happen that when you scroll, you just keep getting more and more and more and more stuff and it never seems to run out? Ask yourself these kinds of questions and you're going to go down a lot of interesting rabbit holes. Finally, read The Phoenix Project. It's a really, really good book. It's like a novel. It's not like a really dry, boring book. That's going to teach you about the whole software development lifecycle process, all the way from the QA person doing quality assurance, through the engineering, through the business, through the developer operations mindset, and how to observe changes. And then finally, talk with the people in DevOps saying, how are you monitoring what we're doing? How does your code get safely out to the web? The more you understand this bigger picture, it's going to set you up very, very nicely for the future. Because the other way that people approach this is, I'm going to go to the job, do the job. I'm going to learn JavaScript really well. I'm going to write a whole lot of React code, get really, really good at React and TypeScript, and I'm just going to keep slinging code out like a madman. And first of all, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So maybe I should pause for a second and check myself here. There's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. I've met people that say, I have zero, inclination, desire to get into management. I don't want to do that. I want to write code all day and be left alone. I want to put on my earphones, write code, and be mostly left alone. You can do that, and it will stagnate your salary. Just straight up. I met a guy, he was in his 50s, super smart, way too smart, and he was just like a genius. I've talked about him a few times, I think, on this show. Anyway, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I feel like I'm stuck at this number. He was getting like 150 or 180K at the time, which in the Bay Area is whatever. It's a lot of money. To me, it's still a lot of money. I hate when people say, oh, that's not that much. Well, I guess not compared to the other 90% of people that aren't making it. But yeah, if you're in the top 10% of earners, I'd say that's a lot of money. But he felt stuck there, and he was in his 50s, and he think, I just can't seem to get past that because as an individual contributor, I see there is a bit of a cap to how much you could get, especially if you're outside of the big tech companies, which 99% of us are. So a lot of times you read about the individual contributor at Facebook or Netflix or one of these massive companies that's talking about their insane salary. And you're thinking, oh yeah, I could do that. If I get really, really good, I could probably do that too. Probably not. No, the startup down the street, they're just not paying that much for the individual contributor. They'll pay you a lot, like for sure. You'll get a lot. But if your goal is to get kind of the wowed amounts of money and the kind of influence that you might want, or even start a company, you're going to want to get out of the idea of slinging code and writing really lots and lots and lots of code into how do you manage a team and how do you manage the processes around code. And there's two tracks you could go down. So I'd be like, son, you can go down the technical path. You can go down the managerial path. I personally am now on the managerial path, and I see how different it is when I talk to the guy at my work who's a principal engineer. He's on the technical path. He's at the height of the technical path, principal engineer. Now, he was helping me and him were coordinating the processes for a team of mostly React and PHP developers and Node Express developers, TypeScript developers. He knew PHP, I didn't. I knew React, he didn't. We still were able to manage the team very well. And in fact, the languages, the frameworks had changed during our tenure at the company. He still was highly influential in our technical decisions because he wasn't talking about React. That was up for the senior engineers to identify that stuff. We said, okay, we put the trust in the senior engineers to really enforce the code standards and make sure that that's going well. But what are we doing? We're looking at how is the code getting deployed? Is it safe? Do we have the right tools around to observe things? How are things being built? Is the code quality up to standard? We're talking and communicating with the more senior people to understand what we can do to help them out. Is there a process that could be improved? We have a new project coming up. How long do you think it would take? Oh, that takes too long? What could we do to make this faster? How are we doing this currently? What are the patterns in the code base? What are the things we're doing? These are the questions we're asking. These lead to all sorts of interesting conversations and a lot of heated debates. And this is where I had a lot of fun. But all I'm saying is You don't need to be the best coder in the room in order to have the most influence in the room. And part of this is also learning a bit of public speaking. I didn't speak for, 2 years as a developer. I just was like, I don't want to talk at all. Eventually, I got told I had to talk at a really small startup. The guy said, hey, why aren't you contributing to conversations? So I would tell my son this early on. I'd say, hey, make sure you're contributing to conversations. And if you're nervous like I was, write down a question before the meetings happen. Do some research on the meeting, write down what you're going to say, and say it. Have your camera on. Dress a little bit nicer than everybody else. If everybody's wearing t-shirts and shorts, put on a collared shirt. You don't want to dress like a way over the top, like with a suit and tie, because then you'll just get laughed out of the room, right? People say, well, you don't obviously understand your place here, do you, son? Right? But if you wear something a little nicer, it gives you that edge. These kind of things are important. This is just what I would tell my kid, right? I'm not going to tell him like the fluffy advice or the generic advice. I'd be like super, super specific stuff. Do that. Speak properly. Don't joke around too much with people. If you want people to see you in that leadership role, make them see you in it. And optics are a part of that. Lead presentations whenever possible, if you feel comfortable. And also opt for always speaking less rather than speaking more. People that speak too much don't leave room for people to want more. I've had to learn this and find a fine balance between over talking, which I've unfortunately kind of come into doing now just because my job requires so much speaking, and then not talking enough. You don't want to never have anything to say, but you don't always want to be the person just filling the air, right? That doesn't leave enough time for people to want to hear what you say or be interested and say, I wonder what that person thinks. So leave that room for that. If you follow all those things, you're going to be on the path. And honestly, the biggest thing you can do is make your intentions known. I didn't do this either. I didn't tell the person, hey, I want to be engineering manager. Hey, I want to be VP. Hey, I want this, I want that. I just said, if I just do my work and be quiet and be a good little boy, they'll look at me and say, you know what? Brian's really good. We're going to give him that promotion. It doesn't happen like that. I learned that the hard way. And I had a really good manager tell me that straight up. He said, hey, you know what? You should have just told us what you wanted, because how can we possibly know that? And I'd say, son, if you follow these things, in 5 to 10 years, by the time you're 30, you're going to be in the position I'm in at almost 41. And at that time, I think you should explore doing your own business, right? Because at that point, you'll have a very good idea of how to run an organization at a high level, right? Or even a small level. If you're running a team of people, running multiple teams of people, hopefully by that point, 10 years into your career, I think that's a totally normal goal, aspiration. Then I think it's time to expand and think, okay, cool. What can I do now? And I think depending on what is happening at that time, you can go a few different places. You can save all the money that you've taken in tech by living a frugal, normal lifestyle. Don't buy a stupid car. Have fun. Go do your vacations, whatever. Buy a nice little car. Be chill. Don't go eat out too much. Do a normal life. Don't inflate your lifestyle, because every pay bump you get, if you keep the same lifestyle, you can save up a ton of money in this occupation. If you're used to living on $60,000 and you get to $300,000, which I guarantee will be basically the norm in the next 10 years. If you're like in a management position, I think you could probably get a lot more than that actually in the next 10 years. So if you're used to living on like 100,000 or something like that, you can pocket, let's say 100,000 a year. If you do that for a few years, you can save up $500,000. If you do that, you can buy all sorts of businesses. By the time you're 40 and 50, you don't have to work. Now, this is you speed running through this kind of thing. And also, I don't have some fantasy of not working. I don't know what I would do. And I don't know what most people would do. I think most people think, I just want to not work. And I'm like, well, then what? What do you do then? Like on a boat and just, I don't know, go fishing every single day? Like every single, I don't know. But yes, but if you wanted to, I think that'd be really cool, because then you can provide something for your kids and you can show your kids the next part of this journey we're on, right? I'm a little later in my journey, and I'm not quite at that level yet. I hope I can get there. But if I don't, I hope my kids can pick up the slack, if any of them want to code. Anyway, unfortunately, they don't seem like they want to go down this path. But I'm sure whatever path they go down, I would recommend something similar to this. Find somebody that knows what they're doing. Say, hey, how much do I got to pay you to tell me what to do? find a job really quickly, try to rise up the ranks, try to save as much money as possible by living frugally, and then finally, see what you can do with the skills you've acquired during that time. Can you teach others? Can you build a product around it? Now that you know this industry really well, what can you do to improve it? And can you sell that outside of work? And then finally, the next chapter is, I don't know. I guess I'll have to tell you whenever I figure that one out. I really hope that's helpful to you. And if you're a father, happy late Father's Day. And if you're a mother, happy very late Mother's Day. And in general, I hope the advice on here is always helpful. And if you have questions, many people hit me up on LinkedIn. I love talking to people that listen to the show. So hit me up and I'll see you around. Bye. That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Varsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it.